All right, good day, everyone. Richard, can have your microphone on and the back coupling to the speaker. Just mute yourself. Richard, Ben.
Oliver, you are not very loud. Maybe you could increase the volume a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will increase it now. I didn't want to, feed into the oversteering. Okay, guys. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So the topic for today's SUSE QE Tools workshop was suggested by Xiao Liang about multi-machine tests. The agenda which I suggest is that we talk about our experiences with multi-machine tests in general. I don't want to give a big introduction into the topic. I know that many of you that are here are already well experienced. What I would like to cover is points like what are good use cases for multi-machine tests, what are advantages as well as disadvantages, where are the limits of multi-machine tests, and then of course I'm very happy to hear about your ideas where you think something that we could try to work on, and that could be from the side of tests, that could be from the side of policies, as well as of course features in our automation software. And based on that, I will of course try to note down some things, or maybe that brings you to ideas, and you can create tickets afterwards, and then we will record that, and then afterwards we can benefit from that. Right. So who would like to start and tell us a bit about good use cases for multi-machine tests, and maybe just mentioning your experiences with that, advantages, disadvantages, problem, as well as success stories. And oh yeah, by the way, I will try again to do a recording, and let's see how this will work out. This time I can't make promises, but we will see afterwards. So, who's an expert in multi-machine testing and can tell what multi-machine tests are useful for and maybe where the limits are?
Hello, this is Klaus speaking. I have just a small contribution. 2 years ago, I worked on a multi-path test case where I needed a server and client pair. The server held the disks and exported them via iSCSI and had the task of switching paths on and off in order to test robustness. And the client had to execute different kinds of disk access. For instance, one of these test cases, which is now well established and routinely passes, I think, is an installation on a remote multipath disk where the server side keeps switching paths on and off, albeit in a way that the disk stays present from the client side.
Right, and what is your general experience with that? I mean, does it work out well?
Well, as of now, it works fine. The essential learning experience for me during development was to set up a proper conversation between server and client. So the server should start meddling with the disks once the client starts accessing the disks during installation. And at some times the server should stop meddling and leave its disk alone. And this involves a couple of message passing between server and client. I consider it somewhat typical, this test case.
Yeah, certainly, and I think it's a good case. It's a good use case. Right.
Well, that's essentially all I had to contribute.
Yeah, thank you. Just one more question. Where do you see limitations? Where would you say, like, yeah, well, okay, one can always think about going further, extending that and having like 100 machine, but you know, where's the limit? Where do you see the limit?
Yeah, difficult to say. I don't really have that much OpenQA experience for that.
So you haven't hit the limit yet, maybe.
The power of the server side.
The resources.
Yes.
Okay, so this is also one important point that was brought up by Xiaolang, that of course we do have certain requirements, and if you want to do that on the same machine, then that means that these machines need to be able to run effectively with good enough performance to be able to, you know, meet all the timing criteria in that environment. Right. One note to that we have support. For example, this is what we use within the OpenQA SUSE infrastructure with GREE tunnels, that multi-machine test scenarios do not need to run on one physical host, but can be among different physical VMs on different physical hosts that are part of one virtual connected network. Yeah, Xiaolang, go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I raised the topic because I had problems with my setup on a machine which does not have so big disks, totally about 100 gig, and I have a special test cases for SMT. So before the SMT server and the client can get started up, it needs the installation for the SMT and the non-registered SMT itself. After that, created the cookie image and booted from cookie image. And the first stage was the problem that the worker consumed too many disks and resources, as you said already. And I do not know. I didn't know what is wrong. Just stopped. I could not create the cookie image. It takes so long time. And after I find the issue, I restart the server and configured enough, just enough for creating the cookie image about over 60 and 80 GB on the spec on my test cases for the test. And then the problem was still there because of networking configuration was not successful. It looks like all the tab device with workers are fine, works just fine, but it was not because I have installed Tumbleweed, and Tumbleweed has, I think, yes, I found a reason why that's not working, because Tumbleweed switched to the NFT tables and IP table is not used, and all the rules are not there. Therefore, the connection to the server to the through the subnet is not working. So after that, I get help, and I cannot use the firewall D because it was not able, and I just installed disable firewall D and installed the old SUSE firewall, and it is working. But nevertheless, that was quite challenging. As you said, it is good to know how to configure that, and it's also to know not configured on the same physical machine, and how to connect with other OpenQA workers with this tab device. That will be a very advanced configuration, I think. Anyway, I followed the documentation on the OpenQA and also exchanged some experience with my colleagues, and that was helpful. Anyway, I have a working setup at the moment.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Okay, so other examples of multi-machine tests which you would like to share?
Yeah, so I probably would like to share the Wicked example. I think it's one of the good examples. I really like how setup is done with the tests. Obviously, Wicked need multi-machine because you need to have one machine where you experimenting, and another is reference machine to which you are, where you have a proper setup. Generally speaking about multi-machine, I can say that important point is synchronization between multi-machines, and so log API should be always used, and yeah, to make sure that all tests work in sync. Regarding what Xiaoliang said, this is actually one of the topics which I wanted to bring, that in my understanding, multi-machine generally, let's say for today, is in a good shape, but probably the weakest part of the multi-machine as a feature is the setup. Yes, there is currently pretty good guide, but yeah, I don't know, every just like, I don't know, 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago, Jose was reinstalling his I don't know if Jose is presented here, probably not. So Jose was reinstalling his Orthos machine, and he again get into some mystery issues in multi-machine where there was no network. And yeah, I was trying to help him. We were going through the guide through several times, and yeah, then after all, actually he found some missing piece in documentation, and I'm not sure if he created a pull request or not.
Unfortunately, not yet, but I'm really interested.
I would double check with him, because my memory is bad and I cannot state it right now what was that, but we just figure out that this is not actually covered in documentation.
Okay.
And yeah, and only after a second session with Clemens and really digging and debugging the things, we was able to set up. So yeah, setup of multi-machine is pretty complex, and yeah, I'm not sure. I know about this package done by Marius, I think, where it's where it's do almost all actions for setting up OpenQA in automatic way, and I'm not sure if there is a coverage for multi-machine in this package.
Yeah, but I don't know by heart, but
Yeah,
and this is something which we check. Two notes come to mind right here. So let me just share the documentation from OpenQA. So as a reminder, you find that on open.qa/docs. And then here, there are different network configurations that are described. For example, there is, let me just check. I expected the header something like networking, but never mind. Normally we use QEMU user networking. That means that the machines are in a separated network, which is not able to reach your normal network from within the SUSE for security reasons. That makes sense to have as a same default. And then there's a bigger section about tab-based network, which includes the multi-machine test setup. So this is what you can follow to set up multi-machine setup on a machine, where we have open vSwitch, and with that we have this virtualized separate network where multiple machines can connect together. And this one includes one point about GRE tunnels. This is what I mentioned in before, that we have a setup that the multiple physical machines can share single multi-machine clusters, so that we are not limited by the performance of a single physical machine. And one idea that I have is, because Anton, you mentioned that maybe some people have different personal experience articles, some blogs, or Marius Kittler has his helper repository, and I think that's completely fine to do that. You start with something that is first only relevant for personal use cases because you don't even know if it applies to others, and then you find that some others benefit from that as well. What we would like to do is some kind of contribution section in the documentation or in the main repositories of OpenQA, so that we can point people to contributions by others. And of course, we have OpenQA Mon, which is an awesome, helpful tool, which we would also like to mention there. The helper repository, let me see if I find that. Would be this link on GitHub, Martius/OpenQA-helper.
Yeah, small comment about GRI interfaces. It was like super cool feature. Before I was user of multi-machine for quite a long time, and before that it was really a challenge to get 2 VMs in a single host due to high load of OpenQA SUSE. And after we got this GRI tunnels feature, yeah, it's become like much better.
Okay, cool.
Another comment regarding log API. I think that one of the things which can be improved in case of log API, and actually it should be not really really complicated task. I think we really should change this current behavior of waiting forever, or at least give chance to change it. We can keep as default wait forever, but there should be a ways where we can say, okay, we are waiting for this milestone, but not forever, but just some certain amount of time. Because current setup leads to jobs hanging for 2 hours in some cases when some mutex are missed.
Okay, so you mean that by default we should have a timeout which is below the max job time?
Yeah, but currently there is no timeout at all. You just the wait function is waiting actually forever, and it's only the fact that we have a mechanism which killing hanging jobs.
Yeah.
This gets killed. Otherwise, it would never exit.
Okay. Right.
Hello.
Other experiences. Yeah, go ahead.
I also maybe have one, let's say a small trouble regarding the YAML scheduling. Well, if we use the YAML scheduling for multi-machine tests, then there is this problem, I think, with barriers, right? So, like, how to describe it? Like, you wanna create that barrier on the server, and you wanna wait with the other clients, and then to use the barrier. But this was usually done in products in the main PM file. But if we use a multi-machine scenario, if we use YAML scheduling, then there is a hack how to go around. I think that the hack is that we create a mutex and like wait for the barriers on the server to be set, and then continue. But is this something like people are aware of, or I mean, can someone comment this somehow, or am I wrong with something, or yeah, just like a topic to discuss?
Pavel, I just sent URL to logs init for Wicked. I think it's a good example how we solving it. We're actually not using YAML schedule, but it's actually easy to port it to YAML schedule. We use a mixture of mutex and barriers. We use a barrier to make sure. We use. So this code should run the same function is called in both machines in ref and SUSE. And in case you are in ref where all barriers are actually created, the barriers are getting created, and at the end we are creating a mutex. And in case you are on SUSE will wait and do nothing until mutex is created. So this is how we.
Yes, this is exactly what I was trying to describe. Thank you for the code example, Anton. This is good. I mean, yeah, I like it that it works, but I still find it, like a bit hacky. But maybe just my impression.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not that we invented the concept of barrier mutex. I mean, this is a common multi-actor synchronization theme, and these names are used there. I don't know if this is, let's say, following the common best practice of how these things, how they are called, should behave or not. In general, I would say we should try to behave as closely as possible as one would normally expect if anyone knows a barrier or a mutex from, let's say, other development environments. What we can do let's assume that everything behaves as it should normally. What we can do, of course, is we can try to, let's say, for always common code snippets, we can of course provide that in the log API itself as a helper to say, everybody who's using barriers and mutex likely also wants to combine the two in this way or serve special use case like presented here, and then we can abstract that into a helper, which is upstream. But honestly, I don't know right now if it's how it should be like this or not. So yeah, I would need some help there, and basically I'm trying just to moderate here, and I hope you will find the answer together with me. Right. Yeah, thanks, Anton, for sharing. Anyone else that maybe has the answer or a further suggestion?
I would have something complementary for this to add. It's multi-machine jobs are most of the time used for testing network programs in general. You have a classical client-server pair, and you want to have one instance acting as server and one as a client. And when I was last year working on VBA supplicant, I was kind of coming to a special situation where you have a client-server-like architecture, which doesn't work in a multi-machine job because the client and the server are in principle a Wi-Fi client and a Wi-Fi hotspot. And I came up with another solution for this use case. And this was to separate the client and the server in different network namespaces. And at that point, we decided to write this down, and that led to this small blog post that we wrote at that point. Yeah, I know. Just give me a second. input device. Is it better now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. It's at that point, we kind of created something similar like like a multi-machine job, but on one instance by separating the client into a different network namespace than the server. And that might be also something interesting for some people who find themselves trapped in a similar position where they would like to test two different isolated networks, but on one machine.
Right. I think this is a good note that multi-machine tests come with a certain additional weight, and sometimes that is not necessary and not helpful for the specific use case. Yeah. So this module is used in the Wi-Fi test. Now I wonder a bit when you said you set this up. I think we might have multiple tests using that now. There's one which is using the GNOME UI to configure and not to configure, but to connect to the network. This is specific to WPA supplicant from the terminal, I assume?
Indeed. It's just another method of creating isolated network namespaces, interfaces, machine, however you want to call them.
Yes.
But
exactly.
without the necessity of creating two virtual machines.
Right. Where would you see the limitation of that approach? I mean, what would or no? Let's compare it to a multi-machine scenario. Where do you see the advantages and disadvantages of your approach that you present here versus a pure multi-machine setup in OpenGame?
I think this only acts as really as a corner case, in which cases you don't want to have or you can't have two different machines. Why am I stating this? It's more of an artificial setup, while a classical multi-machine setup, in my opinion, is much closer to reality and what our customers, what our users do. This is really, I think this is really just a complementary solution in any use cases like WPA supplicant, where having a classical scenario of two isolated virtual machines is not applicable.
Would it work with two machines in a multi-machine setup?
No, because you're using, or at least for WPA supplicant, you're using a kernel module which provides WPA or Wi-Fi connectivity, and that cannot be between two different machines.
Right. Maybe the alternative would be, I mean, in theory, of course, we can have multi-machine tests between physical hosts. So what we could have is physical hosts that have real Wi-Fi network adapters and then connected to you. In theory, I would say that's possible, but I see that as much more complicated, flaky, and expensive. And I can't think of cases where it would really bring a benefit of being, more realistic in that case. Unless we would be, developers of the firmware of the network adapters, which we, commonly don't care about, but rather more the software aspect.
Right. That was exactly a scenario that I tried to prevent there.
Yeah, that's good. So, yeah, thanks. Okay. More examples?
Actually, what Felix said brings me to another idea. You mentioning that we should, if we have something in our mind, we should say about limitations which we see. And I just realized one important limitation of multi-machine testing in general. It's coming from the fact that part of the setup we are doing outside of OpenQA, and its creation of tab devices. And it brings us to really strong limitations that even if you are done with multi-machine setup, you always need to keep in mind that if you would start 10 more workers, you need to take care for creating tab devices for them. if you have in your mind the scenario where you need, let's say, 4 interfaces, you need to double check that all workers in the system have appropriate amount of tab devices, and also you need to not just like amount of devices, but also they should have a certain IDs. And this information, and yeah, I don't know how technically it would be possible or not, but it would be nice if worker will not just expect tab devices to be there, but maybe worker can create needed amount of devices by itself, and we take this responsibility from a user at all.
Yep. Right. Good idea. Anyone has the more specific approach in mind how that could be achieved?
I think that there should be some API calls which allow you to create tab device. No, I mean API calls to kernel.
Certainly that is used when we do create it with command line utilities, and so the question would rather be, should we provide access to this interface, regardless if we call the command line tools or the kernel API directly, to do that from the tests, so that from the tests you would be able to do these things. So, right. I mean,
do you think it's like security breach or something like this?
Well, in theory, what you write in tests is using, let's say, the auth audience test API. That, of course, is limited and always feeds into the VM. But in theory, nobody stops you from putting in anything as you like, and that would be system calls, or calling any application from within the test code which is running on the worker host. So, of course, you can check the tab devices, you can create the tab devices, and you would be able to see to ensure that the setup is provided from the perspective of tests. What is allowed and makes sense from security perspective, of course, is can be part of the question. Commonly, I would say there are different approaches how that could be done, using owner and group ownership to control certain devices, or to allow access to certain commands with AppArmor, or to deny that. So that would be one way to do that. The biggest question, I guess, is always how to make that available to test developers in a streamlined and convenient way. So something like, as part of the test API, have functions that allow to control the network would likely be the most convenient interface. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I see it that currently we already have this variable nick, the variable which allow us to define how many interfaces test will have.
Yes.
So the only change which I expect here is that when there is no tab device, currently test will simply fail.
Yes.
And I would expect that backend would take care about this, that needed amount of tab devices are there with,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you just define it via this variable, and that's it. And you don't call any functions or you do anything else. You just
that would, let's say that would be a change of the existing API, which can include this test variable, but of course it would do that with the variable you do not just specify the requirement, but you say with that variable you specify how many tab devices you want the system to provide to you. Okay, and then if it's not there, then it would create that automatically. Yeah, sure. It's a good idea. Anyone still searching for a Hackweek project? that could be one. Right. This is an important limitation. So how about let's share some best practices. I mean, is everybody, I doubt everybody is aware of all the things that are currently possible. For example, triggering tests and cloning tests is an area where we haven't seen much movement in multi-machine test backend support in past months, but this is the area where we have most recently seen changes also some months ago, but maybe not everybody's aware of all the things. So how can one trigger multi-machine tests, and how can one have an efficient development workflow? How do you change multi-machine tests? So who has recently worked on multi-machine tests development, either fixing something, changing something, extending, or adding new ones?
It's me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have already worked. On my side, what I have done is that I have set up on my machine, I have done all the setup for multi-machine testing. So I will clone it locally. I will do all the work locally, or even I have to create some tests from scratch. I will do everything locally, do the verification runs, etc. So that's exactly my approach. Nothing more fancy than it. And then I will proceed to my pull request. I don't know if that was the question, but it's exactly
certainly
my practice.
Right. So more specifically, how do you run the test? How do you trigger the test? What do you use to trigger them?
One moment, I have it's a specific command here. I'm trying to find it.
While I'm not looking for the job, I just can say that I usually clone it from OSD.
So what do you use for that? I assume you use OpenQA clone job, right?
Yes.
And what parameters do you use there, or maybe some caveats? I mean, what do you have to look out for to not, can it happen by mistake to clone 1,000 jobs that, kill your machine?
Let me check, because
I pasted in the chat. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, thank you, Anna.
And here, actually, there is a specific parameter in the end, the test, that it spawns only the test that I want to run. So no everything. So I will do an ISOs post. I will define the district, the version, flavor, and the most important part for me is the last parameter, the test, which test I want exactly to
Okay.
run.
So you have a list of 2 test modules, a server and a client. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Is everybody aware of that syntax, or are there any questions regarding that?
Usually when I haven't done anything with multi-machine recently, but I had only to clone the one that had a specific parameter, and this was triggering also I think was the server, and the other one, when I clone this, it triggers also the client side.
Yeah.
One more thing that I would like also to mention here is probably it's something that it is supposed to be known, but I have configured also everything on my machine. I mean, the job groups are properly configured, the test suites, or also in the factory I have downloaded probably the ISO or the QCOW that I want to use. So all of this stuff are arranged by me in order, in the end, for these 2 tests to run on my machine, and everything will.
Yeah. Thank you for stating that. So this is the requirement. Let me recap from my side. So what you're using is ISOs post, which is triggering a complete product build, which matches whatever is defined as job templates within OpenQA. So you need that setup. You need this is not the only thing which you would use on a clean installation. You would need the multi-machine setup with the workers, and then on the web UI side, you need the configuration and the assets. So like the Tumbleweed ISO or a QCow image, right? Thank you. Okay, and then Anton, you mentioned perimeters for OpenQA clone, and then Jane also mentioned another perimeter. So yeah, let's go into these perimeters. So skipped chain steps and parental inheritance. These are perimeters for OpenQA clone job. Can you explain what are they used for and what would happen if we leave them out?
Skip chained depths, as far as I know, allow me to skip create HDD job when I'm cloning. So it will not start installation from the scratch on my machine, but it would clone only what I am interested in. It's wicked tests mostly. And parental inheritance, as far as I can tell, it's about when I provide additional variable. This variable will be applied not only to the job which is cloned, but also to a dependency job. Because, for example, if you want to try out some branch with a new code, you obviously want this branch to be run on the cloned job and its parallel job, which is parallel with.
Yeah, like the server and the client, and
yes,
you want
the server
that.
and the client. But if you not use this parental inheritance parameter, the case dir will be applied only to the target job, and the dependency job will run on a master, and it's not always what you want to, or at least what you would expect, because you are doing one shot and you expecting that everything will be the same, but it's not the same.
Right. Of course, with options, one can always argue like what. There are two options, and then the question is what should be the default. I think it makes sense that there is a use case for both. Sometimes we want this, sometimes we want that. Jane, thank you. You mentioned the additional perimeter clone children. Would you like to explain what this is for, where it makes sense?
Of course. I could give you an example. For example, in Anna, and there are two jobs. One is OVS server and one is OVS client. When we use clone job to clone these two jobs, but our clone job, our OpenQA clone job only can define one source job. If you clone the OVS server, you must use this parameter. Unless your children job will not be triggered.
Yeah. So this helps to reproduce a multi-machine cluster by, as the name says, clone the children as well. There's also one parameter which is called skip depths. So how is that related?
Skip, do you mean skip tabs?
Yeah.
Skip tabs only skip the relationship defined by star after test, but this parameter will not affect the parallel with and star after directly this kind of relationship, if I remember right.
Yeah, the help text which I have open here says skip depths do not clone the parent job, which is done by default. So the difference is, let's say, for OpenQA clone job, we always give as the final parameter a single job that we want to clone. And the question is, if we want to replicate that job, for example, we find an example on OpenQA SUSE and we want to replicate that locally, then the question is, do you want to replicate the complete cluster? And the complete cluster could be the initial generation job and 100 of jobs that boot the QCar image. So often that's too much. You only want to clone a subset of that cluster. Now what you could do is you can of course try to clone at a single job and say skip everything else. But then you wouldn't have the relation to any siblings which are in parallel. So this is why we have all these different perimeters. All right. Yeah, more questions around that. So who has some questions to the others?
I can give a comment regarding limitations here. Me personally, I'm not sure if it's need to be covered, but a few times I have a weird scenario where I use this parental inheritance to make sure that the case dir variable will be for both jobs. But also I have another variable which I want to be applied only to one job.
Yeah.
And then I basically don't have such flow, because if I will not specify parental inheritance, case dir will not go to another job. But if I will specify it, this variable will be in both sides.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's really needed, but currently there is no interface to more granular definitions that this variable should go here and that variable should go there.
Right. Of course, what is possible to say, we have the complete templates on the target, on the host where we want to spawn the test, right? So the example as Anna provided, there we don't have test suite specific settings in the command line because we have it in the job templates. That is using ISO's post, so you can see that as kind of a manual setup of job templates and not trying to clone it, because of course when you want to reproduce an issue that you see in a production instance, then you want to clone it as close as possible and only change what you know specifically. Trying to replicate that manually is also error prone, right?
Yeah, sure. This is what I actually was used in this case. I use ISO's post instead and just put this unique variable into test suite where I want it to be.
Then the other approach is another approach could be to say, well, maybe you are working with custom test code anyway, right? So you're running code from a Git repo. Then you can already handle that within code, which is much more flexible. So you can select if server do this, if clients do that, or, based on the job templates, that certain client and server specific modules are loaded anyway. The question regarding, so Anton, if I understand you right, then you are thinking of perimeters that you can apply on the command line, but still you can specify for which part of the cluster they would apply, right?
Like I said, I'm even not sure that we need such feature because it's like really specific a case and there is a workaround which you can do, and the solution would be really messy if you can imagine one. So I'm even not sure, but I just I say it loud. That's it.
Right. Okay. So we have a maximum of 10 minutes. So actually, I would like to continue with talking about further ideas and wishes for the future. So please understand that it is not anywhere near Christmas. So we can come up with wishes. It doesn't mean that they come true. At best, we can help each other. So we find ideas and then someone else is interested to implement them. And again, next week is Tech Week. Maybe you want to try out some ideas. And if not, of course, eventually there could be that maybe the SUSE QE tools team can help to do specific things, especially if it's deeper into the architecture where we have a bit more insight. So one idea Anton already mentioned, it would be we don't even know if we want to have that, a possibility to specify variables on cloning that apply to a subset of a cluster. The interesting question there would be, how can one come up with a good command line interface so that it's clear to the user where to write what, but it's also clear to what job things apply. some special syntax with some special characters like client 1 : and then the setting which only applies to client 1 and this or that. Other ideas or wishes?
Oliver?
Yeah.
Just for the mutex, because there are cases, not so often of course, but that we need to use mutex like amphidromous, like one test needs to wait for another and then the second test needs to wait for the first one. So if they're used in the same test, there is a mix-up with children. So when I had to do it, I found a hack in another test and I used that to clear which children is which. And maybe that could be like a nice feature in the future, that you can do this without any hacks.
Oh, okay, yeah. Do you think it would be possible to, you stated you already found a solution in test code and then you applied that to another place. The most straightforward thing I could think of is just like, yeah, okay, so use this tool and then, create a ticket or at best even a pull request. Maybe it's just a draft which is incomplete, but, gives the idea and then someone else can take over to say, we want something like this, but, upstream together so that it's helpful also to others.
Can you please at least share URL with the code snippets, what you're speaking about? I'm also curious to see.
I can send it in the test channel because now it will take some time to find it.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
During development of multi-machine jobs, we had a lot of problems, or sometimes problems, if also with some mutex or barriers and the wait time. So as far as I know, if a barrier don't find the children, the timeout is only the global job timeout.
Yeah.
And I always ask myself why we don't have a possibility to add a specific timeout for a barrier and then let the job fail. Because in our case, for Wikitest, we actually know that the two machines are more or less in sync. And if they are not finding each other, let's say in 10 minutes, it's sufficient to us that we just fail and not waiting the full 2 hours.
Can you remind me, is there an optional parameter to specify a timeout?
I'm as far as I know, not, but I didn't search in the last, let's say, some months.
I think it's possible for mutexes and not possible for barriers, or other way around, something like this.
I see.
But so yeah, Clemens just raised the same topic which I already.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry,
That's good.
Yeah, it just shows that not only I feel this pain.
Exactly. So yeah, this I will remember that, and to me that makes sense because this is actually something which I have seen from my side, not as a user or developer of multi-machine itself, but from the administration side, that we see like, yeah, okay, then there's some job that is incompleting after 4 hours, and then we find out that it's something which looks as trivial as just there's something which one of the two waits for and the other never supplies that. So yeah, it should be obvious that we can abort there earlier with a clear message. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a valid point. Thank you. All right. So I would like to conclude here and just give an outlook to the next meeting, and then ask you how you found this meeting here. So the next meeting, this is what I suggested, would be to give an overview about the OpenK OpenSUSE org infrastructure. So there were more than one person that was not aware of how that infrastructure looks like. So this is why I would like to present that in an overview specific to the OpenSUSE instance, OpenK OpenSUSE.org, because many of you know the SUSE internal infrastructure. And then the question is, when you want to work with OpenSUSE tests, what is different? Okay. And now I would like to ask you, how did you like the format of this workshop? So just give me a +1 or a -1 in the chat. Raise your hand if you liked it, or raise your voice if you want to give a comment or an idea if maybe this is something that you would like to continue, or a different format. Different formats could be more presenting, or more discussion style, or more deep dives into code. Anything. Let's see, one +1. That's nice. One disconnect. Understand. Lots of positive feedback. That's nice. Any suggestions or ideas for improvement? Okay. Any topics that come to mind that we should bring into the agenda of some follow-up meetings?
I have something, but I'm not sure how good idea is it.
I would still like to hear it.
Yeah, I would like to explore external tools that they can integrate it in the OpenQA. For now, there is also already integrated, for example, Selenium. Selenium is integrated, but yeah, I would like to explore other tools also.
That's a good idea, yeah. Sure.
And from my side, I would like to have more insight on what's actually happening in Tools team. I mean, like, what is your currently, what is your priorities? I know that there is in the schedule, there is some meeting about, defined by Chris in nearest future about your plans, something like this. But yeah, maybe we can have it like on regular basis, like some.
Good that you remind me about that. That is planned on a regular basis for now, every month, every first Friday every month. We will talk about the SUSE QE tools roadmap. That includes the recent achievements, like features that you want to know about, midterm plan, as well as a future outlook. Okay, cool. So the next one would be the 2nd of April. And you are happy to influence the meeting to say what particular things you're interested in, like talk more about the midterm plan, more about the future outlook, or even how we define priorities and such. Okay?
Okay, it's nice to hear.
Cool. Thank you. So with this, let's close it then. Have a nice time and goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Ciao.
Bye.